Oh, I want to start by asking a question. Okay, and this is it's a question that many of you have heard me ask many times, and guess what? I think it's an important question. That's why I keep asking it, and it's why I will continue to ask it. I ask it of myself all the time because I think it's important. It's one of those things. We gather together on November 11th, right, each and every year to remember the fallen, right? We don't want to forget. And I think that's why I ask myself and I ask the church very specific questions on a regular basis because I think they're important and I think they're important for us to reflect upon. And my question this week is, why are you here? Right? Many of you probably have been like, oh yeah, he's asked that a lot. And I do. I ask a lot because it's important. It's really important. Why do I make the decision to go to church? Why didn't I make the decision to sleep in or to watch something on the TV or to go over to a friend's house or go visit family or go do any of these things? Why did I take the time out of my day, out of my week to make sure I made it to church? This is an important question, and hopefully you have an answer. And I'm not asking anyone to give me their answer. I want this to be an internal thing that you're going to answer for yourself. But I do want to give you my answer. And it's going to relate to the story as we get into it today. And my answer is because I fear the Lord. Okay? Now what, and I think, and I've brought this up many times before, I think fear is viewed incorrectly in our culture, period. Full stop. And we're going to get into that in our story here today because fear is actually it's a big motivator. In fact, Claire and I were having a discussion. We were talking about different creatures, and I don't necessarily know how we ended up in this particular instance on this one. We were talking about wolves and how dangerous wolves can be, and she said, yeah, but I'm not afraid of a wolf in a cage. And I said, you should be. Well, no, it's in a cage. It's safe. I said, what happens when it gets out? I don't fear God because God is actively coming against me. I don't fear God because God is doing something to wound me or attack me or hurt me in any way. I fear God because of the potential that is there. God has all power. God has all control. He is fully sovereign. I fear God because I recognize His power and His authority, and therefore, I do not want to be His enemy. And so instead, I serve Him. See, fear actually brings me into correct living, and we're going to see that in our story here today. And I wanted to start with that, and then we're going to kind of loop back around. Well, let's get into our story before you think I'm just rambling about nonsense. Chapter 11, verse 1. So Nahash, the Ammonite, went up and besieged Jabesh-Gilead. And all of the men of Jabesh said to him, make a treaty with us, and we will be subject to you. But Nahash the Ammonite replied, I will make a treaty with you only on the condition that I gouge out the right eye of every one of you, and so bring disgrace on all of Israel. So Nahash the Ammonite, he is not a good guy. He had quite a reputation that went ahead of him. You'll notice it's not in your Bible, but in the Masoretic text that we find in the with the Dead Sea Scrolls, we do get a little bit more information about Nahash. If you're following on your own Bible, you might even have a footnote about this. And it talks about how he did have this reputation where everyone that was on the east side of the Jordan River, so that would be the tribes of Reuben and Gad, he actually had already swept through those two tribes and gouged out all of their eyes, or all of their right eyes, save for these few that were able to rush to safety to the city of Jabesh-Gilead, right? It was only these few, and so they kind of bring their terror with them as well, right? They're afraid of this oppressor who's coming upon them, this tyrant who would be coming to do them harm. And he was a brutal king. However, if you remember in our story, Israel also now has a king. And in fact, this is going to be the first test that this king is going to deal with. Verse 3, the elders of Jabesh said to him, give us 7 days so we can send messengers throughout Israel. And if no one comes to rescue us, we will surrender to you. right? So they wanted to make a deal because they're like, wait a minute, we know who this guy is. We know he's brutal. We know he's harsh. We know he's going to hurt, if not kill, every single one of us. Please, let's make a deal. And he says, yeah, I'm going to make you a deal, but it's going to be a deal you're not going to like. Those are how the deals with the devil often work, by the way. Sometimes you think you're getting relief, but you're actually just making it worse for yourself in the long run. So instead, they sent messengers throughout Israel. Right? When the messengers came to Gibeah of Saul and reported these terms to the people, they wept aloud. Of course they did, right? There's this horrible, evil tyrant of a king is coming, and he's doing these horrible things to our brothers. Just then, Saul was returning from the fields behind his oxen and asked, and by the way, I couldn't help but think, man, what a good king. He's still out there plowing his own fields. Good king. But anyway, he asked, hey, what's wrong with everyone? Why are they weeping? And then they repeated to him what the men of Jabesh had said. And I love this. When Saul heard their words, the Spirit of God came powerfully upon him, right? Saul has made himself a willing vessel and said, God, I will serve you. God, I will be your king. God, I will lead your people. And he allows the Holy Spirit to come upon him, and he burns with anger, and he takes a pair of oxen, and he cuts them to pieces, and he sent the pieces by messenger throughout all of Israel, proclaiming, this is what will be done to the oxen of anyone who does not follow Saul and Samuel. And then the terror of the Lord fell on the people, and they came out together as one. The fear of God showed up. As scary as Nahash was, they knew that to go against God, it would be worse. It wasn't Saul they were afraid of. It was God. So Saul mustered them at Bezek. The men of Israel numbered 300,000, and those of Judah 30,000. They told the messengers who had come, say to the men of Jabesh Gilead, by the time the sun is hot tomorrow, you will be rescued. And when the messengers went and reported this to the men of Jabesh, they were elated. You will be delivered. I mean, is there any better news than that? Right? When we think about Easter, when we think about Christmas, we're coming in to celebrate the birth of Jesus. Think about Easter when he died on the cross, and we can say to each other, you have been delivered. Is there any better news? Right? I can understand their elation here. This makes perfect sense. They are so excited. Yes, our salvation approaches. So they say to the Ammonites, tomorrow we'll surrender to you, and you can do to us whatever you like. Now, why they say this, I don't know if they're just buying time, trying to delay, or what exactly this is, but clearly they already know that their salvation is on their way, but they give this lie to the Ammonites. So the next day Saul separated his men into 3 divisions, and during the last watch of the night they broke into the camp of the Ammonites and slaughtered them until the heat of the day. Right? They woke up really, really early in the morning, right? The last watch is really early morning hours before the sun comes up. And they said, now's our time. And they went into the camp, all 300,000 men of Israel. And it says, they went to the camp of the Ammonites. They slaughtered them until the heat of the day. And those who survived were scattered so that no 2 of them were left together. In a single stroke, they eradicated the threat of the Ammonites. The people then said to Samuel, who was it that asked, shall Saul reign over us? Remember this from the end of chapter 10? Shall Saul reign over us? Turn these men over so that we may put them to death. Remember there were some retractors who said, who's this guy? What makes him so special? They didn't really care. And Saul just said, okay, I'm going to let it be. So now they're all upset. Wait a minute, Saul has just shown his strength. Saul has shown his greatness. Look at the great victory that Saul has led us to. We need to eliminate these people. And Saul says, no one will be put to death today. For this day, the Lord has rescued Israel. He keeps God in his proper place. It wasn't Saul. It was God. God rescued Israel. Then Samuel said to the people, come, let us go to Gilgal and there renew the kingship. So all the people went to Gilgal and made Saul king in their presence of the Lord. And there they sacrificed their fellowship offerings before the Lord. And Saul and all the Israelites held a great celebration. They were free. They were free of the oppression. The Ammonites, who had been this constant enemy since they arrived in the promised land, are now gone. The Lord delivered them. Man, when a great and fearsome enemy shows up on your doorstep, there is no greater time to see what you are made of. And in this case, we see exactly what the Israelites are made of. What was their response when the great and powerful foe showed up on their doorstep? Who remembers? They wept. They were defeated. They were not a whole people. They were not united against their enemy. Sun Tzu, of course, famously gets quoted a lot for his battle tactics and stuff like that. He was an ancient Chinese general. He used to use the example of being holding someone at the top of the volcano, threatening to throw them in, getting ready to toss them in, and then you will see the true character of a man come out. A more modern example that I think is meaningful to us today, when we are under extreme duress and trial, is when Christian churches cooperated with the state to round up the undesirables. This happened. Christians did this. See, all of us would like to think of ourselves as brave and principled. No, I would never, ever, ever do that. I could never, ever be manipulated in such a way. But guess what? Maybe you think you would never report on your neighbor for not following protocol. Maybe you wouldn't, but that's exactly what Christians did. That's exactly what they did when they found out that their neighbors were Jewish. When they found out that their Christian neighbors were sheltering Jews in Nazi Germany. The church was complicit. The Christians went along. Because at the end of the day, our strength isn't enough. Our human strength is not enough. We are weak. We are frail. We are fragile. And until you can accept that about yourself, you'll never understand why you need the strength of God to support you. See, Christians were the ones that were turning over their neighbors during World War II. Right? We often like to think, oh, the Israelites, yeah, but they were into these bad things. Christians aren't always into good things either. See, the facts are that most of us have more in common with the terrified Israelites who didn't fight because they didn't go to war. They didn't rally to Saul's cry because they thought, this is the right thing to do. We need to stand up for our brothers, and we need to go to war and push this oppressor away. That's not why they fought. They fought because the terror of disobeying God overwhelmed them. The fear of God entered into them. They went, oh wow, if we don't obey the Lord in this, how much worse will it be for us than just a simple gouging of the eye? I mean, that sounds pretty bad, right? And yet they recognized how much worse will it be. See, the fear of God was their motivator. And only Saul and possibly, and arguably Samuel, right? Because we don't read about Samuel's reaction, but I think it's fair to say arguably Samuel here probably had the courage to live as God intended. Right? We read about two men who wanted to live exactly as God intended. And fear of God is not a bad thing. In fact, what does Proverbs tell us, right? Fear of God is the beginning of wisdom. Which means that if you don't have the fear of God in your heart, you're naive and foolish. Consider that for a moment, because no one likes to be those things. I also thought of maybe a more modern contemporary example. Kids fear Santa Because they know that what they do and what they say will determine whether or not they get gifts or not. You want to straighten up your kid real quick, you'd be like, well, Santa knows what you're doing. Maybe you're not getting presents this year. Oh, man, that can really turn the top, can't it? We should fear God all the more because he doesn't just see what we do or say. He knows what we think, what we feel, and he's going to hold us accountable to him at the end of time for our very soul. It's a bit more drastic stakes than a few presents on Christmas morning, isn't it? See, I want to go back to the example of the wolf in the cage. Although I think it's apt, I think that C.S. Lewis actually did it better when he cast Jesus as a lion. Right? Aslan, if you've never read the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe series, I don't know what the series, Narnia series, man, I don't know why I failed to think of that. If you ever read that, right, I always love how they talk about Aslan in that story, because they say, well, he's a gentle lion, right? They look at him, no, he's not gentle. In fact, if any of you have ever seen the movie The Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, you know that he goes to war and he kills some things. He's not gentle. And neither is God. But the response to, is he gentle, is he kind, is, no, he's not gentle, but he is good. Right? We fear God, not because he might do evil upon us, but that we might dissatisfy him. I fear that I would fall short. Right? And I know I will. Right? That's why the grace of God is upon us. But each and every decision that I make in my life, each and every day that I live, I want to try and make my very best decisions because I want him to look down on me and say, thank you. You've done well, my good and faithful servant. I don't want to disappoint. I fear God because I know that if I don't, I won't be properly motivated like the Israelites, because something else out there is always going to be bigger and scarier in the here and now, in the material realm. We're going to think that something is going to come against us. Oh, I might lose my job. Oh, I might lose my house. Oh, I might lose. But I ask you, is it worth the cost of your soul? Which brings me back to the very first question. Why are you here? What decision have you made to come and be at church? I come because I'm afraid of disappointing God. I have the fear of God within me. Why? Because just like that wolf in the cage, I see his potential. I see his power. I see what could happen. And I recognize that I would rather be on his side. I would let that motivate me. Because fear is going to motivate you one way or the other. It's a survival instinct that's put into each and every one of us. Right? We're afraid of getting burned, so we don't touch the stove. We're afraid of getting electrocuted, so we avoid the electrical panel, unless you're Jordan, who apparently wants to make a living around it. Right? Fear is a good thing that brings us into a life that allows us to continue living. So let's make sure we keep it properly tuned and afraid of the right things. When the world's coming against us and it seems like we're going to lose everything because of our faith in God, let's recognize that our faith in God, now, God, that's something to be afraid of. That's something to sacrifice for. I would rather willingly give up everything I have to continue to serve him than compromise that. And I hope that one day, if I'm ever put in a situation just like those Christians were back in the 1930s, I hope that each and every day I wake up and I ask myself, who is my fear in? Because as long as I keep it properly in God, then I won't end up making the mistakes of the past. And I can keep serving God into the future. So as we get ready for a time of prayer, let's keep that in mind. As we go back into our lives and we wake up each and every day this week, we should ask ourselves, is what I'm doing favorable to God? Or am I just trying to please the world around me so that I won't get hurt? Who is your fear properly in?